I'm talking about imagination. When I think of imagination, of course, we all go back to our childhoods. Imagination is associated with being a kid. In my case, I had a whole lot of imaginary friends, a whole pack of them. In fact, I took over a whole dentist office at one point, but that's another story. Anyway, I also had an imaginary enemy. She was really scary. She was Gooksy. She was really terrifying, but that's another story too.
Darn, we want to hear that. You guys all peaked now.
Gooksy, imaginary friends in dentist office.
I'm going to get the full story later.
My mom was not a musician. My dad said that he played in the band. He played the flute, which doesn't fit my dad at all. He played the band by humming into his flute to get some sound out of it. So I came from a non-musical family, but my mother was full of imagination. And she would have me go to she would pull me over when I was 2 and 3 years old to make up stories on the piano. So she'd say, let's go to the supermarket today. Let's find some pears. Let's find some, meat. Let's find the meat section. Every time we sat down together, we would have different stories at the piano. And that is why I'm a composer today. It has really nothing to do with my training, although training's a good thing. I'm going to have you use your imagination today because I had this amazing PowerPoint. It's even better than it actually is in your imagination. So it's full of beautiful pictures. So we will create these beautiful pictures in our head as we go through this session. As an adult, I've realized that imagination is much more than it was when I was a kid, that it is a key source for every idea in the world, whether it's science or whether it's art, whether it's urbanization, imagination is behind everything because it is the seed of creativity. What we don't talk about very often is the fact that it is key to human happiness. There is a lot of data that backs this. You get in touch with that imagination in yourself, and you can go these places and your life is transformed. So we want to feed this at a very, very young age. When I have a first piano, I have a piano studio and a composition studio, as well as all the other crazy things I do, including this. But in my piano studio, when I have a student come in for a first lesson, I try to reinforce that music is not about where middle C is. It's not about which finger is which finger, or how to sit. It's about sound. So at the first lesson, right off the bat, I do things like, listen, count. How long does that last? You did that yesterday, Kevin. Gone. We explore the keys and make sounds and talk about the pedal and get inside, because it's so important to remember, even as adult musicians, that it's about the sound. It's about exploring sound, and we want to establish that from the beginning. By the second lesson, I introduce what I call 2-minute creations. And even though everyone in this room is already on an incredible road to musical imagination, these exercises also relate to us, because we don't want to forget, as adult musicians, that the core of what we do is about the sound and the inspiration in the sound. It's not about the rules, it's not about which chord we're going to or what's the right chord to go to. It's about loving the sound. So what I do with my students, and also often when I just sit down at the piano for my own sake and my own creativity, is I give myself seeds that open up the creative mind. I think, well, they know that there are certain parts in the brain that are that activate creativity. There are other parts of the brain that literally shut it down. So we want to find those windows into that place where the open tunnel is. I often talk about composing as if I compose in this wide open tunnel that's delightfully silent, and then these butterflies come through, and I grab a little butterfly as it's coming through. And we want to get ourselves in that tunnel of openness, and these little 2-minute creations can put us there, both as adults and helping our students. So one of the most basic ones, and you're going to think I'm talking to the kids here, but I'm talking to everybody here, is doing a creature feature, where you explore a creature at the piano. This can take us into really important musical concepts. If you think about it, every creature on this planet has a lesson. Think about the sloth. What is the sloth's lesson? Go slow. How do you make a sloth on the piano? I mean, if you teach 2 minutes of the sloth, then later on when you're teaching something else and the kids go, blah, 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 you say, oh, remember the sloth. There are lessons, the snake is legato. You can make a beautiful, I always sit on the bench with my students, and I sit on the bench with myself too. So a snake, I might start with some chromatics, and then get the student going in the chromatic arena. And the snake has the offering of legato. So again, if you're later in the materials and a student is playing with non-legato and you're like, remember the snake, remember that beautiful legato sound. So this imagination, bringing those creatures into the imagination, into your teaching, can be very valuable. It's not just fun. The lion roar is a great example of a crescendo. I always teach my students the lion roar, and it's basically you just put the damper pedal down, do some white notes against black notes, and create a crescendo. Oh, that's so fun. But it also has a lesson in it, in that the lion roar, you say later on, this is a crescendo, this is a chance for the lion to come out in you. So use the creatures. Again, back to, this is about 2-minute creations. You can start your own creative process or open it up in your students by just taking a couple of minutes at the beginning of each lesson and allowing that time to open up the imagination with your student. And it also is a time to bond with the instrument, because it's about sound, and it's bonding also with your student, which you haven't seen them for a week or longer. So this is a chance to sit on the keyboard and have fun together. Another thing that I use as a 2-minute creation is a journey. Let's go on a journey. One of my favorite ones is either up in space, let's go up to space, or let's go under the sea. Up in space, I get the students going up the black notes as a takeoff. Now I can do this with a 5-year-old, I can do it with a 3-year-old. And they're supposed to play their black notes going up as we're taking off in the rocket ship. And we're up in space, and I say, what's up in space? What do you see? And again, the student is by me. Let's make some stars. Again, it's opening up these areas. We stay up there, we do some comets maybe. I have the student I let their imagination determine what we're making. Under the sea is at the end, you come back down from outer space, and we're done with the 2 minutes. With under the sea, we go from the opposite side, starting at the surface of the water, and we go down. And then again, I say, what do you see? Down at the bottom. The favorite, of course, the Jaws. So we always have to do sharks, and we have the sharks chase the fish, and then we have, you know, lots of stories come out. So this only takes 2 minutes. Another one that's very easy to work with is weather. One of my favorite things to do, I'm from Minnesota, by the way. It's beautiful there now. It's really horrible 6 months ago. That, by the way, is when I actually do most of my composing, is because I'm in this hibernation mode where I'm inside of the house and inside of myself, and I want to get smaller and smaller and smaller because it's so cold. But one of my favorite exercises, 2-minute exercises, is to make a snowflake. A snowflake has patterns. Every snowflake is different. They're all mathematically beautiful with these patterns in them. So I will have students create, and again, this is for all of you, you know, where you sit down to play piano, make a snowflake. I'll have a student make a snowflake with a pattern going down. Maybe just skip down notes. That would be a very simple pattern. You can get more and more complicated the more advanced you are. Maybe white to black. Now, after they get the idea of doing multiple patterns, then I move them into what really happens with a snowflake when it falls from the sky. It falls down and maybe the wind whisks it. Maybe it falls again and goes a little sideways and finally gently lands. This is about rubato. It's about playing with sound. So if we're just doing that last one I did, we could come down here. That sense of movement and again teaching other musical skills that are very, very valuable. Imagination is much better for teaching skills, I think, than rules. It's certainly more memorable. Thunderstorms are great. Rain, you know, it's funny. Rain is one of those things that if you made rain on the keyboard the way rain actually is, it would be all over and just wouldn't make any sense at all because it all falls at different spots. That would be rain. But if you make rain patterns, somehow magically it sounds more like rain. You get these patterns going in your ears like, oh yeah, I get that. So sometimes the music makes it make more sense. I don't know what that meant. Feelings. Oh gosh, I have the best picture for this one. Oh, and you can't see it.
Oh, we can.
Oh.
Wow. Anybody you know there, or is it just like
No,
you pulled it off of a picture frame at a Target or something?
Yeah, kind of. I get my pictures all kinds of places. But this is a good time to actually talk about the residencies I do. Sometime maybe you'll grow up to do residencies, musical residencies and composition residencies. My life changed in 2003 when I got approached by the St. Paul Chamber Orchestra, which was way out of my league. They're an amazing orchestra. And they wanted me to be a composer resident in the schools. I didn't know what I was getting into when I said yes. And for the first residency, I was down in the basement of an inner city school with no windows and broken xylophones with all the kids that wanted to get out of class so that they could, and they were all just really problem kids. And they were beating up on each other, and out of that situation, I had to get each of them to come up with musical ideas that I would eventually form into an orchestra piece which would actually end up on the stage of the St. Paul Chamber Orchestra. That's a very long story. It was a nightmare. But I learned so much, and went on to lots more really crazy situations. But what I learned when working with larger groups like bands and orchestras is that within a band or orchestra, you have students who can't even find a D on their instrument. They're just kind of faking their way through. And then you have other students that have been taking lessons for 7, 8, 9, 10 years, and they're really proficient. And how do you speak to an entire crowd and really reach them when they have such a diverse background? Feelings is a way in, and I've used it in several residencies that were difficult to handle, because everyone knows what it feels like to be sad, what it feels like to be happy. And as they get more advanced, I just did a residency in Salt Lake in February, and the students who were more your age, high school students, they were coming up with ideas like resiliency, or courage, or terror. And then they went to their instrument and, you know, terror, oh my gosh, you got that, that's feeling. And then you've also got the dark sounds down here. And you don't need to know how to play the piano to find terror. Or hope, you know, how do you do hope? That was somebody that had more musical training. But it's a way in to reach an entire crowd of people and have them, within 3 sessions, they all had their own original compositions. It was incredibly inspiring for me to see how imagination can produce incredible music with no training. Okay, so I've already talked about how each of these 2-minute creations leads to musical skills. It's not just, if you follow the book too carefully, it's going to make music about the rules instead of about the sound. So think about those creatures, think about the weather, think about the musical concepts that has to teach, and then focus on those and bring those lessons in through the back door, which is in through the imagination rather than hitting them with books.